Thanks for joining me here with Max Noonan, the IT Kid. This is our first in a series of Max on Max. We have a lot of help throughout the month with me and Mike doing our twice a month meetings on Zoom with the Lafayette Senior Center, but this is a way to get information out to more people. So I'm delighted to have Max on the screen today, and he's going to launch into 3 topics that I have been asked to have him speak on. So let me say, take it away, Max.
All right, thanks, Sharon. It's awesome to be here. I'm really excited about this new series that we're doing. Today we're going to take a look at 3 requested topics about Max, and I will be happy to go over all 3 of those. So I'm going to share my screen now. And what I'm going to show you guys, first we're going to start with discussing Preview, which is an application built into your computer that you use pretty frequently, whether you know it or not. Basically speaking, Preview is a file viewer that's built into your computer. And we use this every time that we want to view some sort of file that we've either downloaded or has been sent to us. And so let me show you a little bit what that looks like. Let's take this picture right here. This is a little sample image that I downloaded. If I want to view this image just by double clicking it, which is something that we all do, it's actually going to automatically open up an application called Preview. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to double click that guy. It's going to open. We're all used to seeing this screen. And it's also going to simultaneously open a little application down here in the dock called Preview. And this is an icon that you've probably seen before, but you might not have registered. Preview is actually a pretty powerful app. It's most similar to an application called Adobe Acrobat PDF Viewer, but it's not limited to just PDF. So this is what we would use to open up PDFs, and that's where it's the most powerful. But it's actually used to open other types of files, such as this photo that we're seeing right here. So there's a lot of different things that we do in the Preview application, and we'll talk a little bit more about more of its functionality later. But first, I want to show you what it looks like when we're dealing with PDFs, because that's really what it's designed for. So I'm going to open up this PDF right here, and you can always tell that a file on your desktop is a PDF because it'll have this little black binding on the left side of it. That's just a kind of visual clue that Apple gives you, showing you that that is a PDF. So we're going to open this up. This is a little article I had to read for one of my classes this semester. I'm going to show you a couple of the really cool features that this application has. So the basic features of it are really as a viewer. So we can go through here. You can see the main part of the article is in the main part of the screen here, and I also have these little thumbnails on the side. If you don't have these thumbnails and you want to get them, you can actually change those settings by pressing this button right underneath the X up here, and it will either allow you to hide your sidebar, or it'll give you your thumbnail, your table of contents, bookmarks, stuff like that along the side here. And sometimes that can be helpful, especially if you have a longer document that you want to navigate through a little bit easier. Along the top here, we also have the zoom in and out buttons. This can be helpful, especially because some PDFs that you'll download out there have very small text on it that aren't really optimized for some computers. So this will help you zoom in or out on that. This is our friend, the share button right here, which can be very handy. If you wanted to share this article with someone and it was already downloaded onto your desktop, you can come right here to the share button, press this, and you can send it via email or text, whatever services you have set up on your computer. But this right here is this, as well as these other buttons right here, are the coolest features of Preview. And these are new from the last couple updates to Mac OS. These are actually the markup buttons. So these will allow you to mark up the PDF itself, adding really cool stuff like signatures, arrows, and let me show you what that looks like. So the markup toolbar right here is what we want to expand. And what we're going to do is we're just going to hover our cursor over the little pen with a circle around it, and we're going to click, and it's going to give us a whole new suite of options right here. The first one looks like a little A with a lowercase a next to it. This is going to allow you to select text anywhere in the PDF. and you could edit that text or copy it or something like that. This is one of the more basic tools from Markup. This one will actually allow you to select text and select little boxes if you wanted to, for instance, put a little border around one part of the PDF so you can come back to it later. But here's what I think is the coolest part about the preview app overall is this is the pen button. So if I was going through this article, and let's say that I wanted to circle some part of it, all I have to do is I have to come up here to this pen, have it selected, and then you'll notice that my cursor turns into a little pen on the screen here. And what I can do is I can actually draw inside of this application here. And it'll actually give me two options. It'll either keep my native handwriting, which wasn't very straight, or it'll actually offer to autocorrect my handwriting and my shape drawing to smooth and round lines. So I can do that, and I can reposition this if I want to. I wanted to circle that word. This is just a really cool option. It's something I use in school a lot. I just bring this pen around. I can underline things. I can circle things. And it's just really cool because it really allows you to mark up and annotate this document. There's also all sorts of other options in here, such as adding little shapes or arrows. You know, this arrow, I can kind of make it curvy. I can move it around on the screen. And this is all stuff that you really have to play with in order to get used to using it. This is these two options really here are also very useful. You might use them more than the drawing or the arrows. This is actually for adding your own text into the document. So let's say that you wanted to add a little note right over here. You could go into this text and type in whatever you want, and this is actually going to become a part of the PDF document, which is very handy. You can take your notes directly on the screen. And then this one right here is going to be the signature option. And it's not going to be very easy right now, but what you have to do is you have to set up your signature here, and you can either scan it onto the screen by pretty much holding up a picture or holding up a piece of paper with your signature on it, or if you're on a MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, which I'm not, you can actually use your trackpad to put in your actual signature here, and then pressing the signature button will allow you to drag your signature onto a line where you have to sign. So you can do that all digitally, kind of similar to DocuSign. Honestly, DocuSign's a little bit easier than using this, but this is a feature if you want to use it. And over here would just be adjusting the color and the border of your shapes that you're putting in, as well as the font of the text that you're writing in. So this really is one of the coolest features, I think, in almost any app that's by default on your computer. This button right here will actually rotate your PDF. Let's say you're opening an image and it was sideways. You can press this and it'll rotate it 90 degrees. And then this is actually just going to be a shortcut to marking up the document. So Preview has a lot of really powerful features in it. It's fantastic for viewing PDFs. It's gone to the point where you actually don't even really need Adobe Acrobat anymore. Because this does exactly what it does and more, because it will also allow you to do the same thing with images. Aside from this, it does have its more basic features found in the File button up here, which we're going to talk about in a second. This will be allowing you to save it once you've made all your changes, as well as export it in a couple different ways and share it if you didn't want to press the share button up here at the top. So that's pretty much an overview of Preview, and it is a powerful application. I know you've been using it, whether you know it or not, but it does have a lot of really cool features in it that even if you've just been using it just to open and look at images, it's good to know that it has all those different other features as well. And so now we're actually going to be using Preview for this next topic. We're going to talk about resizing images. So you may have at some point found yourself in a position where maybe you're trying to send an email or you're trying to upload an image to a website, and they'll tell you that your image is too large to do that. And this is actually going to be a pretty common issue now because all of our, for instance, iPhones take super high resolution images now. And by default, high resolution images are actually large in file size. So let's say you just took a picture off of your iPhone, moved it on your computer, and you're ready to upload that onto Shutterfly or a website like that. they might actually tell you that that image is too big. So let me show you how we can actually resize an image. So I'm going to take this image of some peppers right here, and let's go through the process of resizing it. So to resize this image, we're going to start by going to File, and then we're actually going to use this button right here, which is called Export. So we're going to press Export here because this is going to give us some pretty powerful tools. You may be greeted with a screen like this when you press Export, which isn't going to be quite as helpful. I like seeing more information on the screen at once, so I like pressing on this little down button right here, and that'll give us a slightly larger screen. It's easier to work on. But the main thing that we're focusing on down here is the format and then the accompanying file size. So this image itself was natively not that large. There's no website out there really that would block you from uploading a 556 kilobyte image. You're probably going to be blocked somewhere. The minimum that they would block you out would be about 2 megabytes. Sometimes it's as high as 20 megabytes. But this is really what we're going to be paying attention to right here. So this image that I started with, you'll notice is already in the PNG format. And the difference between a PNG format and a JPEG format, which are the two that you've probably heard of, is that a PNG format actually has a transparent background, while a JPEG format fills in the color white for anything that it deems to be a background. For most images, this isn't a problem. If it's just a family photo or something like that, nothing in the image will be marked as a background, but that is the main difference, and people who are visual design professionals are really the ones who care about these two different formats. But for all intents and purposes, PNG and JPEG are about the same for our uses. So, but let me show you, because that is one place where we can see a little bit of variability in the file size. So this is currently in a PNG, and 556 kilobytes is not a big deal. So if you were in an image like this and you saw 556 kilobytes here, you're good to go. You can just press save. But let's pretend that this was something like 20 megabytes. What we're going to do is we're going to actually switch it from PNG to JPEG up here. We're going to ignore any other file type here. We don't want to use this. We don't want to use these two. We don't want to use that, because most websites and programs actually will not accept those file types. PDF is something that we will use every now and then, but not for images. We would use PDF for documents and documents only. But let's say that PNG wasn't working out for us. The file size is too large on that. We can actually switch it to JPEG. Notice when we switch to JPEG, we actually get this slider right here for quality. And this is going to be the key to downsizing our image, because by default, your computer will probably have your quality at least here, possibly more towards the best end of the spectrum. You can see this one at its best is 500 kilobytes, which even the best quality of a JPEG is less than a PNG. And that's important to know if you're trying to downsize an image. Going from PNG to JPEG will always downsize the image. But let's say that instead of 500 kilobytes, which would be a fine amount of data for this file type, let's say this was like 20 megabytes or something like that. That's where we can start dragging on this slider, and watch what happens when I take it just down to the middle here. So we're going to go from 500 kilobytes down to 42 kilobytes. So you can see just taking it down like 4 or 5 notches here actually reduce the file size by over 90%. This will reduce the quality of it, but if a website that you are trying to upload is blocking your file type because it's too large, that means that the format in which it's going to be displayed is not going to be very sensitive to the quality. It's probably going to be displayed as like a small little profile picture or another part of the website where you do not need a super high resolution image because the place that it's going is not very big to begin with. So you can play around with this slider until it is at a certain kilobyte level that will definitely be accepted. And again, for most websites, anything under 2 megabytes will always be accepted, but you can play around with it because many websites will accept up to 20 megabytes. So you can just play around with this slider, and as soon as it's at the quality that you want, all you have to do is press save here. It's going to save that image in the new quality, and then all you have to do is go back, select the same image, and then re-upload it, and that should work for you. And you can do that with any image on your desktop. It also technically would work with a document if you needed to upload a document, although I would avoid trying to put a PDF document into a JPEG format unless absolutely necessary, because the formatting can get a little bit weird. But that's the main way that I would recommend you go about resizing your images, because that will just give you the most flexibility. Of course, if that didn't answer the question that was requested there, just let us know. We can go over it a little bit more in depth next time. But we'll move on to the third topic for today. And that is, it's a very good question. This is one that I've slightly changed my opinion on over the years. And that's the question of, should I rent or buy my router? So by default, most of you guys probably are renting your router from your internet service provider. And this is a good way for them to make a little bit of extra money off of you, because in many cases they can charge you $10 or $15 a month for this piece of equipment. Now, technically speaking, at any point in time, you can buy a router that does the same thing as the one that they're renting to you for about $60 or $70. The main factor there is whether you're also paying for home phone services from your internet service provider, because believe it or not, a router that actually can support home phone lines is about 4 or 5 times more expensive than one that only handles internet. So for most people, if you're using a home phone system, I would recommend not purchasing your own router because the math on that doesn't really work out. But if you're only using your internet service provider for internet, then buying your modem might actually work out, mathematically speaking. Here's the only problem with buying your router instead of renting it, is that you don't get the free updates to the new equipment. Now, for a long time, I'm going to use Comcast as an example because that's a popular internet service provider around here. For a long time, this was about 8 or 9 years, Comcast used the same protocols on their routers. They didn't change it for almost a decade. And in that time, they did change the equipment a little bit, but there was nothing really majorly different about it. And if you had purchased your own router at the beginning of that 9-year period, you would have experienced no difference than if you had rented the router from them over that 9 years, which if you do the math on that, you would have saved, close to $1,000 if you had bought instead of rented during that period. And so for a long time, I was actually recommending people in really any situation, I would say Comcast is not changing their technology here. There's no point in renting out, paying $15 a month for a piece of equipment that hasn't changed in 8 years. So just go ahead and buy it. It's only $60 and the math checks out on that. But then a couple years ago, Comcast actually did decide to change their equipment, and they upgraded to something called Xfinity X5. And X5 came with a new, we call it a gateway because it's a modem and a router combined. And they came out with this gateway, and it was actually a significant upgrade over the old gateways that they had been providing, which again are modems and routers combined. Let me pause for a second, talk about the difference between a modem and a router. The modem is actually the main part that you're renting from the internet service provider, even though they'll call it a router as well. But the modem is what's taking the signal from Comcast or AT&T, whoever it is, and translating that into a usable internet signal. And then the router is what takes that signal and pushes it out as Wi-Fi throughout your house. So the modem is the main thing that we're talking about here, that they force you to rent. If you don't, you can get your own router, and that's no problem. That's something you can do safely whenever you want to, but also with the new gateways, which again are the modem and router combined, you don't really need to go out and buy a separate router. But the main thing that I'm talking about here is actually the modems, is renting the modems part of it, and whether it's cost effective to buy your own modem instead of renting from them. But anyway, back to Xfinity's X5, which just came out. It's significantly better than their old technology, these gateways that they've been pushing out. And they've also upgraded their equipment about once a year over the last 3 years. And so the benefit of renting the gateway from them is that you get automatically upgraded to the latest equipment for free as long as you continue to rent from them. And so for that reason, right now, if you're a Comcast subscriber, I actually recommend you pay them the $10 or $15 a month to use their gateway, because it's very powerful. It's more powerful than many routers and modems that you can buy separately. And also, I have a little bit of a theory. This might be more of a conspiracy theory, but from my experience, it seems like Comcast might be limiting the actual data speeds that are used by third-party modems and routers versus using their actual first-party equipment there. So for any Comcast user right now, the short answer is I would rent the modem gateway from them. For AT&T users out there, which I know is the other major one in this area, that's one where you could consider getting your own modem, but keep in mind that for most AT&T customers, they still use DSL internet, which goes over a phone line. And those modems are going to be a little bit more expensive than cable modems. You're going to be looking at closer to maybe $100 instead of $60. But AT&T actually has not really changed their technology very recently. And the next time that they're going to change it is actually when they switch to fiber optic, which probably won't be for another 2, 3, or 4 years. So for AT&T people, if you do want help making an upgrade to your own modem router, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to advise you on that, because that's more of a case-by-case basis depending on how that signal is actually reaching your house. But for all my Comcast people out there, I would say go ahead and just stick with their gateway that they rent to you, because that will be the way to maximize the amount of speed that you're paying for from them. Stop the share there. Yep. So
Great. Well, thank you, Max. I feel like I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else did too.
I'm glad. Yep. And I love going over questions like this. You know, all of these are fantastic questions. So please, guys, keep sending them in. I'm happy to go over these whenever you guys have questions like that.
Okay, great. And we will do this again really soon.
All right.
Okay, thanks a lot, Max.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
Bye.